I think the real opportunities for us are to come up with strategies that leverage our strengths. So at the moment, I think we've got really strong strength with being 82% renewable in terms of energy. It's something that the rest of the world is hugely jealous of. And I think we can actually leverage off that a lot of extra businesses. So for example, you would have seen Microsoft recently agree to put in a data center here. It's hundreds of millions. And they've done it because they want to be completely carbon neutral with their data centres. And this is one of the only places in the world where they can do it. Scandinavia do it for Europe. But, if you're in Australia or in Asia, where we do most of our data processing and where we have our cloud-based organisations that government, for example, even use, they're using dirty coal to basically power those things. They're very hungry on energy. And I think the other thing is that there's a lot of green funds out there. So there's people like BlackRock in the States, huge organisation, and their CEO is looking for sustainable types investments and companies and countries that can actually demonstrate that. So I think on the back of that kind of theme, there are so many things we can do as a country. So food, which we're already doing well in, our food exports are already up. We can keep supplying really good, clean, green food. But then off the back of science, we can do a lot of other things. And I've kind of seen with my involvement with both Rocket Lab and Team New Zealand that, if you use what I would call 21st century technology, and we actually gear up as a country to actually utilise and leverage that, we could do so much more than we're doing right now. So for example, if we took a countrywide approach to 5G, 5G is an incredible quantum leap in technology as what you can do online. We could be kind of the first country that embraces it, and we would attract so much other investment in New Zealand from corporations, I think, all over the world, based on our clean green, reducing carbon attitude, and on the basis that we are sort of smart Kiwis. If you took, for example, the money that the government just put in the budget for the Cook Strait ferries, right? Now, we could replace those with dirty old diesel new engines and new ferries. Now, if we put hydrogen in, for example, we'd be the world leaders. And people would say, wow, New Zealand, clean green, they really think about the future. That would be the type of approach in terms of kickstarting that I'd be looking for and looking to other countries to invest in us to do it.
This sort of concept, this broad concept of sustainability is something that you personally have been really passionate and vocal about for a very long time.
Correct.
Do you feel like COVID sort of brought some momentum to it, and what is that?
I have been passionate about sustainability for a long, long time. And the thing that COVID has taught me overnight, I think we've just absolutely raced forward into the digital age. So I and everybody I've been dealing with, we've been doing everything on Zoom. We haven't been having to use air travel. I was on a call this morning with 18 people. It's so easy, and it's so efficient. So, and if you think about doing that and doing that on a business basis with people overseas, which I've been doing as well, first of all, you're pulling your carbon footprint down really radically. You're that much more efficient, and you've got time to do other things. So if you come out of lockdown, you can probably do your 8-hour day in 6 and have a couple of hours to walk on the beach. It's a good thing.
What needs to change? How can we get to that 100% renewable?
There's a couple of things. First of all, we've obviously got to retire anything that's to do with coal. So that's kind of Huntley. And the industrial coal that we use in dairy factories and even schools, they burn coal for warmth. So we've got to retire those. That means a lot more geothermal, wind, solar. But also there is a smart way, pump water uphill when electricity's cheap, so overnight, and basically fill the dams so that we're reusing the water. So, if you look at what the ICCC said when they looked at how we could become 100%, there are ways of doing it, and we could do it.
If you could change one thing, what would it be?
I'd love to think that every New Zealander thought through the sustainability lens and how much we could leverage that to our benefit. Because there's huge corporations around the world that want to invest in that. They want to impact investing into green things. We could be the microcosm of that in New Zealand for them to learn how they can do it in their country. One of the things that we've noticed in terms of impact investment through the Tindall Foundation is that by doing things a little differently and creating products like joint ownership and rent to buy and that sort of thing, we've been able to create homogenous communities by building a variety of different homes all in the one area. Those kind of innovations, if there's demand for housing as there was, or at least more than we've got at the moment, we can use these things that we've learned.
One of the biggest challenges we're facing right now as a country is unemployment. What is your view on maybe how we can help those people who are finding themselves without work?
I think the one thing that is incredibly important is that people that are unemployed are not left to do nothing. The worst and most demeaning thing in life is not to have some sort of a job. Now, you may have a paid job as you've had, or now you might have a volunteer job that's paid, but you're doing something that you know is meaningful, that's helping the country. So one of the things that I looked at a few years ago was that we worked out if we planted 200 million native trees in New Zealand, we would help actually bring our carbon emissions back down to pre-1990 levels. The big thing is getting those things planted, getting those trees in the ground. And so we've got the ability to propagate them, no problem. We just don't have the kind of army of people that you need to plant those trees. That's one example. But there'd be lots and lots of things that we could build in New Zealand from a community and volunteer type of basis. The volunteers would be the people that could afford not to have to be on a benefit. The others would be people that would be on some sort of benefit, a living benefit that enables them to eat and have a reasonable life, but they're doing things for the country. America's Cup's going to be incredible. We're giving away the content across the world. Anybody can watch it at any time on their devices, so YouTube, Facebook, free to air, and we can use that digital picture to sell New Zealand during the America's Cup. People are going to be glued to these things, and then when travel starts again, and we've been able to manage COVID better than anyone else, we should be the place where they'll come. And if we're smart about that in terms of only welcoming back less people, but people that pay a hell of a lot more, then we'll be the smart little country that people want to come to.
It feels like technology and innovation and a bit of Kiwi ingenuity are going to be really important factors moving forward.
Correct.
Where do you think that kind of Kiwi attitude that we have, or what is it about us as a nation that you think is going to put us in good stead moving forward?
It's there, it's endemic in us. The fact is that we were prepared to go out there audaciously and take on the world in the America's Cup, and then after a few tries win it, and then defend it, and then win it again, and now defend it again. Being inside that team, when I see the innovation, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, what we did for Bermuda to beat the rest of the world on at least half the budget, and probably a quarter of the budget that those other guys had. When I see what Peter Beck does, the fact that when I first met Peter in the basement of a building when he was just basically getting started, and when I invested in him, we thought, could we actually do this in New Zealand? Could we take on, the space race? And he's done it, So what Peter's done on a particular budget, people around the world would never have believed could have happened. 3D printing the engines, using carbon fibre exactly the same as we do in America's Cup for the fuselage of the spacecraft. He's now building the satellites for people. So you've just got to believe you can do it, and Kiwis do.
Well, one of the many hats you wear is of Chairman of the America's Cup Defence. Things are getting pretty exciting on that front at the moment. Do you see that there are some similarities in terms of New Zealand recovering from COVID and those values that you mentioned, things like having a long-term vision, grit, determination, innovation, beating the rest of the world?
Totally, yeah. Team New Zealand is I think the epitome, the example of why we can pull through and beat the rest of the world. But we've got to be prepared to, do it differently. We've got to say, the old way of working is not right anymore. We basically had a simulator that enabled us at Team New Zealand to work out how fast we would be, what type of foils we needed, how we could beat the other teams. And we did that on the smell of an oily rag. So, if we take that attitude in New Zealand, have the big audacious goal of how we can get there, but do it the Kiwi way. It is referred to as the number 8 wire way of doing it. I don't kind of like that myself, but that from our forefathers was the way they used to do it, and it's kind of the ingrained ability that we have as Kiwis that we believe we can do this stuff, and we should.
Yeah, because when we talk about going back to normal, the reality was for certain sectors of our population, normal wasn't that great.
No, of course it wasn't. Look at the inequality we've got in this country. Since COVID and lockdown, we actually don't have any people living on the streets anymore. We've been able to deal with a lot of those things because there's no pressure at the moment from immigration or tourists on our infrastructure. So, we don't know when the people are going to be coming back. Are we going to be able to have students back in our universities from overseas, or are we going to be able to have a lot more tourists, etc.? But while we haven't, why don't we utilise those things internally and make sure we create a market that makes the money go around here in New Zealand?
Through your work at the Tindall Foundation, you have supported many New Zealanders over many years. Do you think you're going to see more need than ever before in the coming years?
Yeah, I do. I think we'll see a lot more need. Clearly we are headed for a depression, and that's tough. That's a tough time. However, we've got some really good things going for us in this country. We can grow as much food as we need. A friend of mine who ran Tesco in the UK used to tell me they had 6 days worth of food in the UK because they imported everything. We're a net exporter. We can grow everything we want. It's a matter, I guess, of organising things so that people don't go hungry. And so that's already been happening. I've been involved in a thing called Kiwi Harvest, the New Zealand Food Network, and we've stood up a whole lot of last mile people like the Volunteer Student Army, Whānau Ora, a lot of iwi, a lot of marae, and they're kind of delivering food to people that need it. But the great thing about that is if you involve the people at the front end, they know who need it the most. They make sure that they segment things.
If you could set a new course for New Zealand, what would your priorities be?
To leverage our clean green image, not just from a tourist perspective, but on the basis that we're already 82% renewable. There is a huge demand from overseas at the moment for green hydrogen and green ammonia. There's absolutely nothing that would stop us from actually manufacturing our own liquid fuels to export to Asia, but also to attract big investment from people who want to be part of this green wave. And so that's data centres that will run on green energy instead of coal, and everything you can actually think about that makes New Zealand a much more viable place. So, for example, the Cook Strait ferries running on hydrogen, etc. So it's kind of the theme of using the latest technology, thinking about being in the 21st century, using 5G, for example, ultra fast, to utilise new ways of working so that we can be different to what we were.